thank y'all for coming today.
Thank you.
I'm Garris, our partner in SDA. Thank you to Homeschool for bringing me out.
Of course, thanks for having
Thank you for the summer coin. I leave next week, and so I am very weepy and in my feelings. But all I want to do today, like, I'm not going to like do a formal lecture because fuck that, it's summertime and it's Friday, it's the evening.
Right.
But I really just wanted to create an occasion for us to talk about these three readings. I've got like a few things I want to say and kind of riff on, but I'm really just hoping y'all come with questions or even like points in the readings that really stand out to you and we can just talk through it for the next hour. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. So, we got three pieces. I'm gonna sit down, y'all. There's a whole ass couch. So we've got three readings today. One by Toni Cade Bambara called On the Issue of Roles, which is from her anthology, The Black Woman, which came out in the late 60s. I think roughly like 69, 70 maybe. And then we've got Don Lundy Martin's Black Poetics Against Mastery. For me, that piece really taking up the ways that we can critique and challenge essentialist narratives of blackness to try to carve out more space for articulation of self. The final piece is by Saidiya Hartman, a title that I just fucking love, The Anarchy of Colored Girls Assembled in a Riotous Manner, which is from her recently released book, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, where we get an idea of what a speculative history of black girls and young women who are essentially claiming anarchy as a way of life and being. We get an understanding of how they use noise, and really beautiful noise, in New York amidst riot to theorize resistance, to enact resistance. So we're going to start with Toni Cade. So Toni Cade Bambara, have you ever read anything about Toni Cade Bambara? Have y'all heard of Toni Cade Bambara? A writer, filmmaker. If you ever get the chance, she's got a collection of short stories called Gorilla My Love. The preface alone, I'm gonna see if I can pull up on my phone. Because Toni Cade has a way of writing these sentences that are as long as paragraphs, and they just kind of weave in and in. It's like the stitch somehow gets deeper and deeper and deeper with each phrase, each phrase, each phrase. She's got one of those sentences in this piece. But with On the Issue of Roles, for me, Toni Cade is stepping into a conversation that a lot of scholars now are taking, I guess, taking seriously and sadly not citing or quoting her enough, which is to say when folks are theorizing about ungendered blackness and claiming ungendered blackness as a way to articulate selfhood, which is to say when we call into question the ways that gender as a formation of white supremacist thought begins to structure and always already regulate black life, then what does it mean to claim non-gendered blackness, right, as a way of being in the world? Essentially, folk trying to live up to codes of manhood and womanhood and simply, as Bambara would say, take up the question of blackhood. What exactly could it look like, feel like, to take up the question of blackhood by itself? To refuse gender altogether, even fuck refusal, circumvent gender as a project, and take up blackness and blackhood. How might that work? Alright, so yeah, I'm gonna read this one little thing from the preface to Gorilla My Love. Give me a second to get it up. While I'm pulling this up, there is tequila, there is mezcal, got like a little Patron right here. And I also have some edibles if you're so inclined.
It's a boiler thing. Take a shot of tequila and then drink wine after to chase it and keep drinking the wine and it'll really fit the body. So I know which way you are.
Alright, so I would just read Bambara calls this the sort of preface. And so this is from the beginning of her short story collection, Gorilla My Love. It does no good to write autobiographical fiction because the minute the book hits the stage, here comes your mama screaming, how could you? And sighing death, where is that sting? And she snatches you up from your bed to grill you about what was going on back there in Brooklyn when she was working 3 jobs and trying to improve the quality of your life and come to find out on this page that you've been messing around with that nasty boy up the block, embracing the sobs, and quite naturally your family strolls in sleepy-eyed to catch the floor show at 5 a.m. But as far as your mommy is concerned, it's 1940 and something you ain't too grown to have your ass whooped. That's the first sentence. Like the first. Okay. And she just like piles it on. This is the second paragraph slash sentence. And it's no use using bits and snatches, even of real events and real people, even if you do cover, guys, switch around and change up. Because the next thing you know, your best friend's laundry cart is squeaking past, but your bell ain't ringing, so you trot down the block after her. There's this drafty, cold pressure from the weather that the weatherman surely didn't predict. And your friend says in this chilly way that it's really something when your own friend stabs you in the back with a pin, and for the next 2 blocks you try to explain that the character is not her at all, but happens to be speaking one of her lines, and right about the time you hit the laundromat and you're ready to just give up and take the way, she turns to you and says that seeing as how you have plundered her soul and walked off with a piece of her flesh, the least you could do is spend half the world to turn back. That's a 2-sentence preface on a collection of stories. So, but can y'all like hear in those 2 sentences how she packs and packs and packs all of these moments and encounters and relationalities into just 2 damn statements, right? It's not just her, it's her and her mother, right?
Yeah.
It's also the family members that stumble into the room at 5 a.m. to catch the floor show, and it's also the friend. There's also the scene where you imagine that she's leaving the stoop and following her friend down the street because she hears that laundry cart squeaking, right? There are all of these things that are converging in the space of 2 sentences. Toni Cade Bambara makes an entire fucking world in 2 sentences. And that's why, as a thinker, as an artist, as a teacher, I am so drawn to her writing, because she has found ways with this very, very lush prose to do what some of my favorite Black theorists cannot do. Absolutely cannot. We don't pay enough attention to craft and form, to tell the stories and bring the vignettes in ways that are as rich and lively as Toni Cade does. So it's with the offering of that preface that I just want to jump into a chat of, or discussion of on the issue for us. So this piece emerges in the late 60s. It is circulating around the time when a theorist named Hortense Spillers, we've probably talked about Spillers. If we've had a conversation about Black theory, we've probably talked about Spillers, but Hortense Spillers, I affectionately call her T.T. Spillers. Ain't met her yet, but it's coming soon in Italy 2020. So, Spillers has this groundbreaking essay called Mama's Baby, Papa's Baby, an American grammar book, where she theorizes essentially about the ways that we have, at the level of structure, right, all the way up to the articulation of individual identities, right, use the negation and suppression of Black women and Black femmes' voices in order to articulate our own voices, right? Which is to say, right, we only know what the fuck the on switch is because we know what the off switch is. And so Spillers helps us go in and understand the ways that the Middle Passage, right, was essentially rooted in a particular denial of Black women's subjectivity. And how that particular denial was not just the basis of a political reality and a set of historical relationships, but it's also spilled into scholarship. And so one of the things, like, Spillers' essay came out in 1987. In 1969, I believe, she penned a letter. That was 1970. In 1970, she penned a letter to the Black Scholar, one of the leading journals of Black studies, and she mounted a critique of Black movements, and what are the gender politics of Black movements, and she mounted a critique of representation, which if any of you have seen Arthur Jafan's Dreams of Color and Death, the comments that she makes in that particular documentary, she makes in the early 70s. So Spiller's been saying this for the better part of 50 damn years. But she writes this letter to the Black Scholar, letter to the editor, critiquing the ways that all these Black activists and scholars who were in Atlanta in 1970 to take part in the Pan-African Conference. She said there was this very particular way that people kept regulating the work of Black women to the margins. They kept saying that Black women's labor could be the source of inspiration for political movements or for Blackness more broadly. But nobody wanted to center what the hell Black women were doing or what Black women had to say at all, right? Mine just 1970 and a 2-page letter to the editor. Right? The year prior, Toni Cade Bambara publishes this piece, which is asking us to think, essentially like toss away the prerogatives of white supremacist gender roles and take up blackhood. So, are there any pieces in here, any quotes that really stood out to y'all, or y'all like coming through it? You don't have to elaborate.
There was a section immediately. It's on the issue of Roles 107, I believe. There was an admission to having edited a piece that clearly defined the othering in terms of gender of men and women, masculine and feminine, and how the necessity of othering was prevalent for all parties to be able to accept it. However, admittedly, they co-opted and reused the piece and changed it to us versus them, allowing the readers and the participants to make of it whatever they thought. Immediately, they took it on issues of race. They could see it. They could see the disconnects in issues of object-subject or subjugation or power and authority, and fit that when it was black versus white, but until it was actually, the curtain was revealed that actually, no, this was a very gendered statement. Now to apply that same frustration to the role of femmes and not the role of racial minorities. Apply that, and there's pushback, there's a big hurrah, there's this big deceit, there's this inability to reconcile, I think, the cognitive dissonance of it and saying, no, I'm rooted in this white supremacy. I can see it as black and white. I cannot see myself as the perpetrator when it comes to gendered roles. And until the dust settled, like it had to be exploded for all parties to really see that it was a broader issue of gender. Now apply that same frustration, apply that same knowledge and that recognition of the imbalance when we actually tell you that this is a gender baiting, and it took really like upsetting our side, because it was an us versus them dialogue, to really see that, like, no, the them in this is of the people that you are perpetuating the same side effects of the white supremacist patriarchy on too. And it was just really like fascinating that it had to be, that you had to burn a lot of bridges just to get that dialogue started.
Can you tell us your name, please?
Oh, hi, I'm Tia.
Right there. Portland's finest.
Anybody want to respond to what Tia just said?
I didn't read the other pages yet. I'm still reading up. That one like spoke to me.
No, I think one of the things that there are a few things that came up from it, right? So essentially what's being done is when it comes to taking up issues of, we'll say, gender disparity, right? Or gender power differentials within black spaces, right? So the white gaze, like fuck that whole question of dynamic. We're only talking in the context of blackness. What happens when the prerogatives of white supremacy coded as gender get taken up as a prereq for black liberation? Which is to say, what happens when people decide that we have to take on the ideology of the dominant in order to get free? I'm not sure how the fuck that works when the dominance, right, position of power is leveraged against, right, your voice. And so one of the things that comes up though is the romance of resistance, that gets coded as masculine, particularly black and masculine, right? And so what that means then is that when people start to call out Cosby on his shit, or R. Kelly on his shit, we then say, well, you can't take down a strong black man because in the context of patriarchy, doing so means going against the race.
Right. However,
That's garbage, that's trash, that's a garbage politics.
exactly.
But in part, the danger, right, of that romance is that folks also code it as what we need in order to collectively move forward. Case in point would be for the first 2-3 years of the movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter movements, right? A number of commentators, activists would critique young black activists because there was no central figure. Which is to say there was not one person who was leading the fucking charge. Which is to say there wasn't one man, right? Or there wasn't one person that reinforced the ways that we have historically situated men in leadership positions for movements. Because there was no figurehead, all of a sudden everything was scattershot. We know that is not the case. We know that to not be true. But we have to constantly push our awareness and our knowledge of those actual fucking realities up against the narrative that says, well, but we need one strong figure. And it would be better if that figure were a man. Right? So Tia, so all that's to say, like what you're saying came up in this workshop, right? but it also becomes one of the ways that we structure our understanding of race. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a politics of representation in popular culture, or we're talking about whose voices it is that we need to center, or we're talking about the potential of Black progress. Right? So it is everywhere, but we treat it like it's nowhere. And that's in part the violence of the romance. It's fucking ridiculous.
There was another part of that same piece, I believe, that expressed that. It was at the bottom of that page. We have such a reluctance to talk about things like these, for fear of being weird. Like, we've become so complacent in the flow of things, or in the hustle of just trying to maintain, that we can't even bring those up to start identifying them, to start chipping them away and removing them, because then that difference is enough to make it that much more difficult. Like, if you can create an entire world in 2 sentences, you have all of these extra layers that stepping outside of that finite world can jeopardize so much, because like comfortable discomfort.
Which is in part how like the rhetoric of diversity and inclusion is so fucking manipulative.
Right.
In part because what we're doing is we're incentivizing people to become part of larger structures, which are again are historically rooted in the oppression, right, or marginalization of those same voices. But then we tell folks, well, if you want to stick around though, you have to adhere to the protocols of the structure. Which then says, well, but after Black people have fought so long and so hard for say the right to vote, or to say for scholarships or the ability to go right and get a Black Studies degree, why would we risk all of that? So in part, right, we trade voice for comfort, for security. And it's not to say that we're all horrible for doing so, but it is to call into question the ways that we rest on our, we'll say, our entitlement to a notion of security that is actually not ours. Because our freedom is always coming with masters. It's always there. And so if you don't believe that it's always there, you can go to, and this is like always like championing or defending Barack Obama. Because it's similar in the ways that Barack Obama was critiqued during his presidency. You can consider the fact that even Henry Louis Gates, one of the like treasonable clerks of Black Studies, who is like a high Black literary theorist, right? That's the reason why he go to his house, realize that he doesn't have his keys, and get arrested trying to break into his own house. Right? People don't see credentials when they look at Blackness.
Right.
They see the potential to transgress boundaries and regulate the other. That's what Blackness is. It's an invitation to transgression.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that those are the credentials that are seen embedded like right away. Is the skin. And, like, I think it's very important that that's like decoded. Like the degree also exists, but like the skin is credential.
Can you run that back like this invitation to what?
Please, transgression.
Yes.
Etiquette has no end. Like, whatever rules govern society fail to have integrity, Blackness enters the frame.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like exorbitant transgression, right?
But I'm thinking, because I'm like, Spillers doesn't like stop talking about this. Like the idea of Black culture comes out and she's like still working us through these ideas. Especially like kind of backtrack a little bit to that idea about like a Black checking of a Kelly or of an abuser is like always already reinscribing a lack of morality in white supremacy. But like white supremacy will like fool you into thinking that like you were the lack when like we taught y'all how to watch. It's very like simple way of like we raise your children and like showed you how to structure a society that you fail and continue to fail at. Sorry, but I'm just like thinking along with how this conversation is like you went to 69 and like Spillers is like this is still what Spillers is lecturing today. Like and it's just like we ain't even scratched the surface of this conversation in some way.
Yeah, in many ways for Spillers touch is an expression of foundational violence. Like it's not just like contact in the historical sense of like Western European contact with the continent of Africa. But it's like the very expectation of touch. Consider how many people, right, have expressed a willingness or desire, we'll say even just through their very actions, to access your voice, your personhood, your body, your interiority, and it does not come with an invitation. They simply show up to you with the expectation. That is an expectation of their right to touch, right? Like, and that requires no consent at all. Right? This is why, like, Sadia Hartman in her first book, Seeds of Subjection, talks about the rules of seduction, which is to say how enslaved black women were framed as seducing white men. Right? So in that particular framing of the conversation, we're not thinking about white men and even white women as the perpetrators of anti-black violence, right? But in that particular scheme, right, we get to say, or we get to argue that black women are in fact seducing, right, these white men, which is to say they're asking for it, which is also trash and fucked up politics, right? And so what Hartman does, and then what Spiller does, and then what Tony K. Bombara does, is have us question, or at least give us the occasion to call into question what exactly gender does. If anything, if we're linking gender roles or the gender division of labor to black social movements and progress, what ground could we possibly have to stand on by adopting the gender prerogatives of the white man? We have really no ground for that. It's not to say that there is a right or wrong way to do gender, but it is to suggest that when it is that we're thinking about our collective or individual voices, we should ask where exactly we got our literacy from. At the bare minimum, right? We can call those questions. What else? It's on the cases. Yeah.
I spent a lot of this piece thinking a lot about the way that she thinks about Africa and the rights movements and all the movements that are happening there, and how she uses gender roles that exist there to inform her ideas about blackness here. And I just, it was very, I spent a lot of time thinking about, like, well, isn't the blackness that's around you enough to be able to trouble this stuff? Like, why, like, what is this looked at? Like, is it about the historical period in which she's writing? Is it about, like, the people that she's talking to that feels like a more palatable? Or is it just, like, her not seeing, but, like, I also, like, even in the moment where she talks about, like, blackhood as being, like, a type of gender that, like, people could take on. Like, I don't see how you could get there from the references that she brings. Like, that's something that I, at least in my reading, can only come from her experience as a black woman in the U.S. So why aren't those her, like, citations?
Oh, yeah. So in part, I think it's, this isn't, like, definitive, right? It's like taking a stab at it.
Yeah.
I think it's in part because she's writing during the emergence of black studies as a discipline. And just as black studies is emerging as a discipline, so is ethnic studies. So are the folks that would, like, later call themselves, like, third world studies. Right? And so these are folks that are saying that what we're talking about locally is inherently connected to these global power relationships. Right? This is in part why so many black student groups, protesters, even folks like Chicano Latino Studies, all these students were advancing bibliographies that were like, we're not just talking about, like, what happens locally, but we're talking about what happens to our people in the diaspora sense. Right? And so part of what Bombara gets to do is say, you know, she could argue that we have all the examples that we need. Spillers did that in an essay called The Idea of Black Culture. Right? But I think what Bombara is doing is circumventing Europe, right, to get back to the continent. And it's not to say that she can go definitively back to the continent and say, well, they were doing this, and so we can claim what they were doing before contact with the West. But it is to say part of articulating or trying to understand who it is that we are and might be rests on us not using the same protocols as white supremacy. And so one way to think about it is like it's a return to the flesh. That's it.
I don't think it's super useful. Oh, sorry. I don't think it's super useful to, like, project black into her search for continuity there. Because I think for me, what she's doing with that search for continuity is saying, like, that sense of genderless or gender neutral blackhood is innate. It comes from somewhere else, and it's still in us. It's not invented or, you know, developed. It's already there.
And it was Pan-Africanism. Like, it was a moment.
Yeah, it's the 70s, right?
Like
Exactly.
Yeah, people keep trying to formalize it, right? Like decade after decade after decade, folks trying to formalize it, right? It would never come to movement. But, you know, Tony King is like, we can do it in the context of movements, but we can also just, like, do it in terms of how we articulate self-relief.
For from that perspective, I didn't get the same sense. I think the sense that she was getting was through the lens of white supremacy. We're often told by those with the power to do the telling that this isn't on us. This goes back to your tribal roots. This goes back to Africa. This goes back to your hunter-gatherer, primitive civilizations that we rescued you from. And then she does the work to dig deeper and say, actually, no, in Cameroon, everyone is mother. In these places, here are the facts that we have on the west coast of Africa, where we, many of us, were actually imported, problematic from. We actually had these pre-existing structures. So for you to give a cop-out, you being the white supremacist narrative, that this is not our biblical conditioning, this is not Adam and Eve, this is not white supremacist heteropatriarchy, this is on y'all. Y'all brought this over to the New World, to the diaspora. I feel like her going back to saying, like, actually I've done some research, here are the facts, here is an actual location with a culture that I can reference and cite, Cameroon being the example. We have gendered respect and a different hierarchy. So I feel like her using African mainland and historical Africa was to refute the white supremacist narrative. What I took.
Yeah. If you pair this piece with Sylvia Winter's work on the concept of man, society, and then like cuts through all the shit right there. Cuts through all of it. Because Winter's project is largely like going through and just taking the fucking race, right? Just to this Western European construction of man. Like, it's a full-on dissection, right? And it is wonderful. But she does that in part so that we can understand all of these modes of thinking, the ways of thinking that inform how we think about the typical so-called citizen or person. So Sylvia Winter does, like, and y'all, the reading is hard. Yes. It is so hard. And I said it's like
read it for 12 years.
Right, yeah, read it for 12 years. Right? Like, Sylvia Winter has an unpublished 800-page manuscript. Right? I'm like, she got like 80-page journal. And the shit is dense, right? But the beauty of it is, like, she will map. Like, she would talk about cartography and Western Europe's relationship to Christian ideology, right, in the 18th and 19th centuries. She will connect all of that to the way that neurochemicals work in our fucking brain, distilling it all the way down to how we, like, look at film and literature, genre conventions. Like, Sylvia Winter, like, operates the way that she scaffolds arguments about what we would call now anti-blackness, right? She essentially helps us go from, oh, I'm looking at this film called Do the Right Thing, but I don't quite know who to identify with as somebody who's in the audience. Because the narrative says one thing, but also the structure says another thing in my relationship to blackness, and even like Latinx identity says another thing. And Sylvia Winter is like, oh yeah, all of that is historically sedimented realities of power relations that are now rooted into the very way that you think and act in the world, right? So much so that the idea of narrative closure as it's deployed in cinema, right, gives our brains pleasure, right? Like the idea of like cinematic closure, right? But the idea of cinematic closure and narrative closure, as we typically talk about it, rests on the assumption that we are homo subjects, which is to say that we are objective or can be objective. So all of that is to say, Sylvia Winter like work us through all of these ways that looking at film is rooted in power. All right. Anything else on Tony Kate?
Yeah.
So, take what I'm saying with Chris all because I haven't read the reviews as much as I'd like, but here's the point, maybe think about what you read the establishment of the pedigree is looking back at cultures, whether they're Western cultures or outsider cultures, such as African or Asian or what have you, is aligned with white supremacist prerogative also. Because it seems to me like it's very related to the idea of canonization. So I wonder what would happen if we step out of that framework period.
No, when you're talking pedigree, you're talking about Huey Lewis Gates doing all them specials, like telling black people to squat their cheeks. I got to read that. I got to if I'm off, like, give me that. What are you talking about?
Part of it, but I also think the idea that we need to trace like any sort of genderless notions back to a more primitive to get some sort of respect. You know?
So you're like not for that?
No. I'm not saying I'm not for that at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying to what degree is it necessary to move past it? To move towards genderless.
No, it's an option. Right? The way that I think about a lot of these arguments, nobody's saying like, in order to do this, you have to do this. If anything, these folks are like, what if? What if you cleared just gave yourself a little bit of room to become who you think you might be? Like, what do you like? Give yourself just a little bit of space to figure that out, right? She's not even like, what you need to do is get one of these like Garvey ass, like bougie Garvey ass cruises back to like, you know, West Africa. She's not saying any of that. It's like the language that we have been given and the ideas that we have been given actually don't nourish us the way that we convince ourselves they do. And what do you do in the wake of the realization that this shit won't work? Like when you can't rest on grand historical narratives to situate you as a person in the world, what do you hold on to? This is why she says, you know, like taking up the gun is actually a bit easier than absolutely remaking one's understanding of blackness and gender. Like it's a little bit easier, right? To like gender resistance as physical. This is, if y'all ever read Octavia Butler's Kindred, there's a reason why the protagonist of Kindred is not a black man. And that's because in the context of the late 60s and early 70s, the so-called revolutionary ideology of many black power circles was like, no, men get guns and they go to the front lines. Men didn't have to think about lineage anymore. Men didn't have to think about survival. For Butler, if her protagonist in Kindred was a black man, the book would have been a novella that was low-key, actually a chapter that was like 10 pages. Right? He lived kind of. He got woke, and then he died. That would have been the book, right? But having the protagonist be a black woman that has a particular relationship to genealogy and American history meant that she was betwixt and between everybody else's expectations, needs, wants, and desires. It wasn't a luxury of being an autonomous person who also gets to act on behalf of the whole fucking group. It was, no, I actually can't do that because all of these people need me. And it's like, Patricia Hill Collins, Hortense Spillers, Maya Angelou, Trulia Harris, Mary Helen Washington, and a list of other black women have argued for the last few decades. Right? Everybody feels entitled, right, to speak on my behalf. Everybody in that dog, but nobody actually knows my name.
I just wanted to drop Patricia in the room. And like black feminist epistemology is like such important work, and I think your question is the fact that like we canonize or whatever, we refuse to know in the flesh, and so it's not that she had to research Cameroon to know, but in order for it to be published, it had to be cited in a certain way. And like we know this, like we do this and make videos and publish articles because like it's required for me to teach in the fall. But like this is what we know, and I think sometimes it'll be the first thing you can find that can align a little bit to go a certain way. But anyway, I'll say I texted you too because I had the answer of it. But yeah, Patricia, she did that. Like she really was like, no, I knew this from Great Air, or like I knew this from the kitchen, always already. Like we've been knowing. However, you gotta put it in somebody's book, so it has to be aligned with thought.
No, I was just, yeah.
That's like folding Don Lundy Martin. Don Lundy Martin is, I like to think of this piece as like when I really take what Tony K says and I run with it, I inevitably get to Don Lundy Martin's work on Black Poetics Against Mastery. Because in part, if we're thinking about the acquisition of knowledge as part of like this kind of totalizing regime of identity, it's to say when we think about the fact that we can be experts on other people's lives and work and voices, and that means we also sit in a particular kind of power relationship to them. Right? So by that I mean, right, what happens when white people can get jobs doing Afro-pessimism like scholars can? What happens?
shoulders and train them, though.
Got 2019
That book is
200, Alex.
The book is coming out. Grateful. You can't act like that on video. We on tape.
I don't care. I need a drink after that.
We're being seen here.
When aren't we being seen?
Sure.
I feel very seen.
And
sorry.
that's when black men can get more jobs and better jobs doing work on black women's literature than black women. There's Anne Ducille, but there's two pieces. Barbara Christian has an essay called The Christian Theory, and Anne Ducille has a piece called The Occult of True Black Women. They got hit me about some
I just read that this morning.
and it's like, right, essentially like they're boiling down, like Barbara Christian can go in and talk about not just what black women are theorizing and creating in the space of literature, right, and theory, but she's also thinking critically about the ways that academic scholars are being professionalized to become experts on the work of black women. So let's block this, right? Now, black women are whole ass writers, writing,
Entire.
Alive.
whole ass writers, right?
Breathing
Walking
people
out windows.
around the corner.
Right, around the corner. Sorry. A stone's throw away. Right? So it's
Act like
like,
it's on your hand.
right, so black women are like literally creating
Present
a body
tense.
of work. Right? Present tense as fuck. Right? So black women are here writing books, which is to say they are theorists. Well, what happens when you have an entire group of emerging professionals whose literal fucking job it is to then right? To intervene and say, well, you know what, I am the expert or the authority on the works of this writer. But she's still living. And so how could it possibly be that you're an expert?
Anything other than first person.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right? And so, but this is like Christian's critique, is that academics for far too long have rested and continue to rest on this assumption or assertion that we can go in and make ourselves experts on somebody else's works. We can go in and look at how so-called objective, like literary, cultural, and historical conventions show up in the works of XYZ, but that's not the same. Like if I'm reading Gail Jones, then me reading a scholarly article about Gail Jones's work is not the same as reading the work of Gail Jones and understanding that as theory. Right? And Barbara Christian is like, we need to call this shit into question.
Just a quick throwaway thought. This makes me think about the academy as like a white supremacist form of anti-indigeneity, insofar as the academy for the longest time, accruing thought, has really wanted to accrue indigenous thought from across the planet to benefit white supremacy. Even as, white people in Britain and Italy and France were getting rid of their own indigenous ways, they're still trying to preserve like that good shit that grandmama gave them, like in the academy. And I feel like this is nothing different, just like this sanitization and like incorporation of like, I don't know, antimatter. Like it's like, and that's what like scares me about. It's like this is antimatter. So like this whole fucking project, what the fuck are you doing? And if you are able to do it well, the devil's a liar. That's all I gotta say. The
Devil's a liar.
liar.
Now you know yourself on it. Okay.
Like that, right? That's all.
The foremost expert.
That's all you need to say.
Is that? Hold on.
It makes me, you talking about like, Watson being alive and not being happy. Makes me think a lot about, I listened to an interview with Kiese Lehman after he released his last book. And he talked about how he was so surprised that like, people kept giving him condolences about how his mother was dead. And he was like, oh no, she's alive. She's alive. Like I wrote, she's fully alive. Like I wrote, just because I wrote about it doesn't mean she's dead. And then people just kept coming up to him and being like, oh, I'm so sorry about like.
This is my truth about you.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's wild like that. Yeah, it's like all these like folks were like we spoke to being like, oh, like, and then after me saying that, being like, how could you write all of that if she was alive? Like, how could you like talk about your mother in these ways while she's still living?
So this in part, like having just learned, I didn't realize that's what was happening. Fucked up. That's in part what happens when grand narratives about blackness, right, show up before the person does. Right? It's like Don Lenny Martin like calling out what so-called master narratives and grand narratives do, right? Which is like a carryover from modernism. One of the things that I'm understanding is happening in terms of how people are engaging Kiese is that we don't have much space ideologically for successful black men whose mothers are still alive. We don't have much room for it. The father is always already absent because of the way that we frame black families. And so then for Kiese Laymon to have done this much and divulged so much, his mother can't possibly still be alive. It's a premature erasure of her life, right? Like people actually don't even want to deal with the fact that she is still around because it makes it a lot easier to think about what it is that Kiese is talking about. But for me, it actually would be far more compelling. If you go back and read the title essay to House and Give Yourself Another America, then it would be, so Kiese Laymon in that essay talks about the 4 times that guns were pulled out. One was by a cop, I think one was by his mother, and maybe twice. He pulled a gun on himself, right? And so it's like, but as he's working through all of these scenarios, he's stitching his particular story to like the lives of people, to realize, to Trayvon Martin. And so there's this way that he's like crafting an elegy, but he's also kind of like resisting this broader image of who the so-called victimized black subject should be. Which is to say he's creating a space for us to identify with him as a black person. Right? Not specifically a black man, not somebody who's experiencing representative for everybody else. But even doing that very thing, if you read that essay, I beg you to look at the final scenario where Kiese now has the potential of becoming a better man. It's rooted in violence committed upon a black woman. Right? So even in order for Kiese Laymon, like one of the strongest voices, right, arguably one of the strongest voices of like black arts and letters in that moment, in order for him to move forward as a young black man, he needed to be able to help a young black woman who was violent. I don't know that he could have figured out a way to write his essay without making the black woman a victim somewhere in it. Because he had to be over, or he had to be able to step on it in order to be what he believes he needed to be. Right? Which is absolutely
I think that tied well into the Martin piece. Not to skip ahead, but there was a quote that took me not a quote because I was footnotes, that there was a slippage, a slippery slope between perception and projection. So like that very notion of I have to, project this point of my identity and the work and the greater good, whether it's nutrients at the expense of another, or framing someone's entire identity on that it being a passive activity, that it being subjected to perception and to the gaze and to how this is going to be ingested. And I think that particular citation was a great segue into that piece because it was all about, perception is reality and like our ability to be perceived, our ability to, there was a quote from Martin that black people, that we suffer from the condition of being addressable, that our blackness is defined by our ability to be addressed. Once we are seen, we are black. We are black in the narrative, we are black in the institutions, we are black in the policy once we enter, and like that does not define the blackness, but that is the not the trigger for blackness, but the combustion, the starting. That is the initiation of our reception of blackness, and I think that was like sacrificing the feminine character as a victim in order to actually tell the story was just like the prime example of that.
We do a lot of really fucked up things in the movie. Like that's what keeps like coming up for me over and over and over.
Always a sacrifice.
Right? It's like, in the name of legibility, I need to do this, or we need to do this. But it's like, but it ain't just a matter of being like, I want to be seen, right? But you gotta leverage your voice against somebody else's. Black women, black families are
still the other.
Absolutely, right? Like still the other, right? That we don't want to take up. Because it would actually behoove us to want to get black men into the so-called like dominant women. That would be more beneficial to everybody else. Right? Like what gets me with the Martin piece is like she tries to talk to her parents about their life being Jim Crow. And like,
I've never experienced racism.
I never. Like,
You're like Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Crow. Whole ass Jim Crow.
The whole entire system.
Right, y'all. We grew up with like, you know, documentaries and shit, right? It's like we saw the photos, we saw the dogs,
Evidence.
all of this damn evidence, right? And so like, we don't, the evidence in that particular narrative of Black life in the 20th century is so damn potent for us that we can't even seriously entertain the idea that Black people had a good life during Jim Crow. Right? Another way to think about it is like reading Martin's piece made me think about Samuel Jackson's characters in Django Unchained.
Okay.
Right. Ride with me for a second. Here's why. Is that many people, when I would talk to some of my film students about Django Unchained, and I'm like, you know, fuck Tarantino, fuck that project, but there's this really interesting moment towards the end of the film. How many of y'all have seen Django?
I refuse.
I've watched enough of both of them. Research. Right.
I closed my eyes, my family watched it during Christmas. I closed my eyes. Fell asleep. Woke up and it was over.
You're like, it's a pass.
No, sorry. That's wrong. My spirit knew, my flesh knew how to sleep.
So Sam Jackson plays Stephen, this old ass slave who's living on Candyland, right? John Candy's plantation. The quick and easy read of Stephen is that he's Uncle Tom. Thinking about him in terms of his proximity to John Candy, the master of the household, yes, by all accounts, Stephen was an Uncle Tom. Yeah, I'm not interested in trying to make that case. What interests me more is the question of what it is that Black people needed to perform in order to be an enslaved person who died of old age. We take like
the odds of failure to thrive.
Right.
It's like we don't get that.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, and it's not even about like Stephen doing this for everybody. You really like take seriously the idea of like Black selfhood and the fact that this one person found a way to live and thrive and spend his entire damn life on this plantation such that he outlived most of the other folks that were there. Like, what are some of the assumptions about Black folks and Black resistance that we have to toss to the fucking side? This is Don's whole thing. Is that once we zero in on the individual, yes, we're all individuals who live in the context of whatever the fuck, right? But oftentimes, because we're so wedded to a particular politics of representation, the work of the individual is only so useful as its ability to be enacted by the group. Right? So put it differently, right? Black Panther is dope because it let all these Black kids know that they can be superheroes. Right? What I'm saying is like that feeds into a particular narrative of Black resistance and inclusion. Right? But that's not the same as saying like the weird nigga that y'all grew up around that nobody fucked with. The way of life that he was forging or she was forging is just as valid as Foucault's work. It's just as valid as Spiller's. It's just as valid as Simone Brown, who in Dark Matters talks about the fact that in what I think it's like, I'm bad with it, so I'm a shitty historian in that way. It's like maybe like 17th and 18th century New York, there were lantern laws where Black people walking through the streets at night needed to have lanterns so that white people who were out and about knew that a Black person was present. Right? And so it matters in like this idea of making oneself known and legible is
Like
part
the
of
asterisk to sundown town.
Right,
Like,
absolutely.
You gotta be seen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is in Scenes of Subjection, Hartman says that the performances of jubilation that Black people were enacting after slavery were all coerced.
Yeah.
It's just like you needed to perform excitement about no longer being enslaved so that white people stopped fucking with you because they were convinced that you were just celebrating that thing. Enter Juneteenth. Absolutely.
It's Juneteenth today though.
Yeah, today.
We're free-ish.
Yeah, free-ish.
Bullshit.
Right, but it's still like a performance.
It's so
of potential
performative.
free.
Like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, which is not like that valid. Like it doesn't kind of work. And these folks are like suggesting, or I think Martin is suggesting that we can take that work seriously. It ain't gonna benefit most of the people in the room. Like the way that I show up in the world, if I do the work the way that I want to do it, right, isn't going to reinforce a grand narrative for any of y'all in this room, I'm going to fail that project always already. Like, that's going to happen. But I'm not going to show up and be like, well, I do my likeness this way, and so y'all will do well to mimic that work. I'm like, no, I believe in the potential of yourself. And these folks are saying the exact same thing.
Did you ever read the proposition? I was going for it. This is a quote that I think ended up on my Instagram earlier. And I'll read from @Fitzgerald on all platforms. Follow the dog because the book deal is coming. Proposition. And if anyone wants to record this as it happens, we're here for this. My hair is freshly twisted. Proposition. Only in the space of discomfort can we be truly creative. Can we be truly creativity? And I want y'all to like take that up. John Lundy Martin has all the degrees.
Yes.
And most purposefully is writing this as it's written. So only in the space of discomfort can we be truly creativity. When we are most comfortable, most in the zone, feeling the thing that we are doing as if running strong in a clear path, we are in the space of making. That is opposite to what I think of as the creative, generative space of making. This strong run feeling is a good feeling. We are, as artists, in the mode and practice of mastery. What we produce often feels familiar, mostly in finish. In poetry, we like to say, when the poem is produced via this mode of production, that the poem came to us. There it is, a little gem. So I guess I had this question. The first thing when I read it, I was thinking about Caldera, and I've been to Caldera with Sharita a few times, and we're out of place. Like we're literally in the woods, and the only like contact we have, maybe Sharita got but the only contact I have is like the white governess who like is living just a few. But she's far enough away to the gate to get out before we do, and we're literally behind snow. You remember you've been? Yeah, like a few people know what I'm talking about. The residency, and the residency space of like you're accomplishing enough to be legible to whiteness. Crest, you've gotten far enough for someone to say that you deserve a distance from the world to make your work. And it's uncomfortable as fuck because I like to make my work with Jack's Chicken and Hennessy. Yes! And it's this thing, and like, so I have to run the sisters to get the last bottle of Hennessy on the shelf. It's in there. It's Keon left sisters because they call me Keon and sisters.
Oh!
Me.
Oh.
They're like, oh, were you just here?
Well, both of y'all were recognized.
But because like the lone niggers in this space. So I wanted to think about like, what is that what is that place where it comes? Because like I'm like, not that any work gets done in this outdoor. I think it's usually on the way back. Yeah, in a conversation where like, okay, now that we made it out, like I was driving in the car with a PhD on name and another white person. But when I saw Detroit Lake, I was like, okay, I've got like nothing killed me at that. Right, but like Detroit Lake, because niggas go out there and fish. Yeah. So you're like, okay, we made it into like, or like the fact that like my grandparents came from Vernonia. So like when I passed that sign, I'm like, okay, we've been here before. Like I'm getting closer there. When I get to Vanport, I'm like, okay, I can survive. Like if I die on I-5, I ain't gonna die because I'm like on life flight to Emmanuel. Like, so the cause and the cure is the same. Cause like the same people that like made sure that we couldn't live built a hospital. I'm high as fuck, so this is like, right. Like, so niggas ain't gonna die. They'll experience Black Death and the fact that like they had to like get into an accident on the way back from like the thing that when I got that Ford Foundation money, that hit different.
No, that is different.
I got back in. I I cashed the check, paid you your money back, and Demi his gas money in Salem. Did I not? I got that $1,800 and went directly. I called Sidonia O'Neill and said, we're going to Louis Vuitton today. And now what the banks was like, you can't spend that much? I said, okay. So let me take it out. I said, I'm going to give you this today. And we went back the next day and I wore the bag to the Kentucky Derby party that I hosted for the Urban in Portland. What I'm saying is, we are always already in this relationship to not just precarity, but to death. And so I'm thinking about, like, what does it take? Like, I mean, refusing mastery is already. Before something to come to us, like what, like, all do we go through just to get to the creativity, to get to be creative? Or are we already always not going through it? So you don't need the grand narrative of me traveling, but like just being in the world.
I ain't never felt more creative outside. I don't like, if my work is taking up the politics of anti-blackness, and anti-blackness is everywhere, then there is no outside. And so I don't understand the expectation or the imperative on the part of funding agencies to be like, we're going to give you money and resources to go outside. No, what you can do is either bag of money or let me sit here with my folks and get the fish and actually theorize and do one thing.
You're going to do it anyway.
Right, because we throw away more ideas. Like,
And we don't need to be aware of
we throw away more ideas.
The black outdoors.
Shit, right? Talking shit and flirting and playing dominoes and spades, right? And sharpening our shit. Yeah, but that's the thing, right?
But I write my shit down and let everybody. I want y'all to know that if y'all said anything good, it's going to record and it's going in the book. But period. I was always doing field work.
Faded. So, but here's the thing, right? It's like there's a certain understanding of knowledge production that we tend to produce. Right? That's this idea that it's like, you know what these folks are really going to need is to like get out of nature. Yeah, okay, outdoors is cool if that's your shit, like if you have that narrative. But I think in part we can call into question what it means for art agencies to be like, well, you know, you've been tucked in this space. What I need you to do is get out of that context. At times, what you could do is just fork over the money, let us cover our business, let me go to Rapid Cash and make sure that my balance is zero. Also, get some liquor with my people and do my shit. Right? Let me do all of these things. Because actually, the business of what I'm willing to consider living does not adhere to any kind of like budget rubric that you could possibly put together. Like, there is no line item for how it is that niggas create. Right? Like, it matters to me, for instance, like I was talking to my mom, she lives in Alabama. Love my mom's complicated, you know, it's like, it's cool. She hits me up and was like, she been with this dude named Eddie for 20 years.
Eddie.
Eddie is, she's hesitant to call Eddie her boyfriend. They've been living together for the better part of 20 years.
Like you do.
Eddie does not have a key to her house. Eddie does not have a key to her car.
You don't have a key.
Right? She told me this now, she said, look, I need to get some money, so I had to go and pawn my P380. But Eddie gonna sit up here and make it seem like he can decorate my house. She was like, this man who hangs out with me from time to time in my house, thinks and say, I'm gonna decorate my house. She was like, my brother Frank can come in here and try to tell me how to decorate my house. She was like, but Frank has had more experience decorating a jail cell than my house. And so what he's going to do is come into my house and tell me how to arrange my things. Right? Now, all of this, I say this primarily because ain't no theorist who's centering that way of being in the world. Right? Because this is the same woman who, if you go back to around the time Selma came out, there were all these black folks who were at the Evan Pettis Bridge in fucking Selma, holding up signs and reenacting the march across the Selma Bridge. You'll see my mama in Newsweek holding up a whole damn placard. And so the fact that she got a P380 and she's gonna call her son and say things like, well, when you go to see Keon, make sure that you got, what did she say? Condoms and mouthwash, because you never know what end you're gonna be using. Right? There is no black sexuality scholar that's gonna show up on a page and say shit like that and do shit like that. Because in part, there's so many narratives that we opt into when we're trying to frame how it is that we live. And the very way that my mom shows up on a fucking Tuesday morning undermines all of those narratives, or most of those narratives. Which is to say, the way that I've been trained to think about and understand black people, black life, even my own fucking self, right? The language is insufficient. The protocols don't work. The skill sets don't do what they claim to do, PR is really good. And so we keep replicating it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, the way the arts industry kind of like, to what you were saying, requires like black creatives, black artists to separate themselves from the community. It reminds me a lot of how like the white supremacist idea of the artist is to separate oneself and go, like the manifest destiny, go into nature, conquer land. And like that is tied to a kind of like nationalist idea.
Shit, El Rey.
Thank you. It's like such a white supremacist nationalist idea about both land and body and race and place and all of the ways in which we relate to place, and requiring the black artist, black creative, black individual to separate themselves from community is disjointing themselves from blackness in many ways. And it's like a and it's such a very strange cycle that we have to get into, because then you start thinking about funding, and it's very precarious, and it mimics a lot of the patterns that we get into in everyday life as black people as well. So
My own, can I ask a real regular ass question? My thing is like, what if we could offer niggas a space to do funding? Because that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, is to imagine if I can buy my own shit off of a club night versus never having to apply for anything, which I never have. And so, to that, like, we think we need a Guggenheim, which, like, I know niggas would, and we might get it later. But I think if we do enough of this, and I'm not saying we have to raise the offer or nothing, but you can support homeschool and you can send decent money because they're about to be in Arizona. But like, we got period.
I'm working on it right now.
I'm listening. And so that niggas up at Intel and everywhere else. They're like, this is, I'm sorry, I'm being depressed. This is me with my fist up. But it's like.
But then the FBI gonna come through with a helicopter.
It doesn't have to be stateside.
We got some people that's gonna get some bigger money for us too. And it's gonna be under the radar. I'm just like, that's sorry.
I'm just saying that this like black potentiality, like a nigga's just like smoking blunts and like not being bothered, that like money gives us from these fundings and stuff like that. It's like, it's anti-American.
Help me.
I mean, it's anti-imperial, like niggas being involved.
Yeah.
Niggas creating art. It's like an active threat, like it's showing up in the NSA. Like that's what I'm saying. Like there are like, I think that's why it's not happening.
Yeah, but
like
private property and free enterprises.
Yeah, I guess the chat we're having right now is making me think about what it means to like subvert what we're talking about, like a white spatial imaginary, by sidestepping it completely and focusing on the mastery that we're reading in Martin here towards the end as like a kind of unsettling about ourselves and what we know and are asking about ourselves. So I'm like pausing on that stuff, and I'm thinking about, just because I'm laying out this text like today with Kadima for this book, and Catherine McKittrick, she sent me some excerpts from her forthcoming book.
Come on.
No. She just sent some excerpts.
And it's from a book called Dear Science and Other Stories.
Tell us more. You can't press. Forthcoming. It's not out. I tried to buy it, but it ain't out. Sorry.
This watermelon kombucha tequila is really. I was gonna just read the last part of the excerpt that she sent, and I think it's okay because I'm gonna print it in like 10 days, and then you'll read it. So it says, I want to reference other possibilities. Citations as learning, as counsel, as sharing. Citations are moments of learning. Citations are not descriptions. We share these stories and notes to collectively struggle against suffocating racial logics, like sorrow songs, like freedom dreams, like flying cheekbones. The collaboration, the conversation, the sharing, the curiosity, the wonder, the friendship has allowed me to work out in part where and how Black people imagine and practice liberation as they are weighed down by biocentrically induced accumulation by dispossession. Some of the freedom stories are in our notes. I remember that the struggle against oppression is tied to our flesh and brains and blood and bones and hearts and souls. There are underlying, often invisible, moments of Black liberation. I remember that quantifying and endlessly describing Black corporal and affective and physiological labor belies what Black studies offers. There are some things we can keep to ourselves. Some stories can be left out. Some things they cannot have. The citation is curious. We share our wonder, and we are familiar with the brutally knowable. We do not need to measure and describe all of blackness. Maybe what we do not describe is a different form of life. Ooh.
But she said
So to me, like,
yes.
so that thing of discomfort, like that's where we're most creative, like that's where we get to be creativity. It's these things that we are not describing, and we know why we're not describing them. And it's in that creative space that we have these kinds of openings to types of life.
Excuse me. Yeah.
It's recorded.
Tell us your name and what we can expect in 10 days, and also.
Well, my name is Shavita Pleasure. This is excerpts from Catherine McKittrick's forthcoming book that she's going to let me print, and this book that DA also has writing in that will be available at the end of August.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So I was asking them.
But yeah, I guess I would maybe if I don't know if I can, but try to synthesize that into an open question of like, you know, in this kind of refusal of a perfectly crafted gem, or this kind of like unknowing and this discomfort of like creativity. Yeah, a smart thing. No, but like in that, like I guess I'm just like wanting to focus in that space where I get to kind of sidestep these other not sidestep certain structural realities of the things that we're talking about, but what is this other type of knowing and unknowing that I can get pointed to through this?
Yeah, I think like that's for me the push with Hartman's later project, our latest project, but also with what we did the same, right? Like, so I go back and forth with refusal, it depends on context. Refusal still rests on a particular kind of legibility of power shift. Right? And so I'm not particularly like interested in refusal when I'm talking about how Black people, how we create ways of being in the world that are just about ourselves. Right? I'm much more interested in coming up with ways of thinking with and
There's no skull out there right now. How you going?
Of individual life.
Right.
Which is to say, like, there is no story that we can fix these folks to, that we can fix ourselves to. I'm interested in the moments where the story doesn't do what we believe it to do.
That's right.
Right? And so, and that's the part where, like, we are literally creativity. Right? But again, like, even going back to the part, the danger in that is that we can't rest on a notion of security.
Yeah.
Stuart Hall said this breaking thinking about his life from him. Like this was his whole project, where his critique of representation was saying that like we like representation in part because it reinforces a narrative of inclusion that gives us or grants us a particular sense of security, right? While we're continuously marginalized, right? Like for me, inclusion and representation is carefully regulated policing.
Are we getting our validation at the expense of our like actual freedom of expression?
Well, that's not under representation. We're not getting validated. Under representation, the idea of who it is that Black people could be, right, under the umbrella of white supremacy is getting validated. And so a narrative is getting validated, right, at the expense of our voices. And I think, right, so what Dominique Martin is suggesting is that, yo, we can actually, and we are every day, right, producing these opportunities to engage how it is that we are literally creating the occasion of creativity. Right? Like we are theorizing the human by virtue of how we show up in the world, how we think and act. And if we unmoor that shit from just the conversation about refusal and censor, well, what exactly is it in life are we theorizing? Do we let that shit be open-ended? Right? Like that's in part, like that's actually where I think a lot of the work is headed.
Right.
People talk about like reclaiming the flesh, or like Amber Musser is talking about like queer femininity and brown songs. Like all these folks are like, look, we can claim abjection. You can be like actually a person who begins outside of the logics of whatever is called normal. Right? So essentially, if your work is about inclusion, like the premise means your project is failed.
Nice.
If your work is about articulating personhood, possibly interiority, then maybe you're on to something. And if you want that to be legible to whatever audience you want to speak to, then okay, give us that skill set. But that's not secure. It's precarious. But sure.
Morehouse men just got accepted to the PhD program at Fordham. And I was in my kitchen stirring up macaroni and cheese and oxtail.
That's one of
On Sunday night. And he was in my earphone. We were talking about, because this question, I don't know, maybe I'm so high that I'm going here. This idea of representation necessitates being a part, right? But also like being human. And my biggest question is like, if we weren't in that project, why are we so busy to reclaim it? Like, we not only want to reclaim like, I mean, humanity in and of itself, to say like, oh, I am an active moral agent that won't do and can't do. Actually, I don't even operate by that. I don't. Human today. Oh, now you can be human because there's crime.
Oh, like 100% human.
Because there's law. Now
a fool.
And then and it's always the basis of like every anti-protest. Oh, we're all human beings. Are we? What's that?
What percentage? 75,
that's the thing, right? Like these folks are like, we can like. There's room for that conversation, and also the fact that, like, real shit, I opt into a relationship to man and the notion of human when that fucking W-9 goes into an organization. I'm gonna say. Also, there are occasions for me to opt into a politics so I can get my point and somebody can leave me the fuck alone, right?
For sure.
But it's worth understanding, right? That it's like my opting into that politics does not mean that I'm inherently inside of politics.
For sure.
Right? Like in perpetuity. Right?
But what would it mean? I guess like I'm thinking with Lil Wayne, who says I am not a human being. And I'm actually thinking what this like Area 51 mean, like this like we don't have to be that. We don't. Because like I think when I snap, like that's my legal defense. Oh no, if you check this, I was never a part of that project of a humane response. So that's why they're in that condition.
Yeah, but that perception that we go back.
But okay, and I'm fine. But that's additivity.
And I see this tension in Sun Ra because like Sun Ra was giving a lecture talking about like how I went to an airport and stuff like that, and you know I'm talking about like I'm sad and stuff like that. It's like, well, a moment ago when we got your ticket wrong, you were claiming about being a human being. For electability, bitch.
Right. But I mean, this is government.
Though, right? It's like when Sun Ra wanted to get black folks to a space, particularly black people to a space, of like theorizing about who it is that they were in a society that didn't acknowledge their voice. There's a scene in Spaces of Place where he goes into this youth center and there are black kids that are kicking and he tells them, he was like, y'all aren't real. Right? So he's insisting that they are not real because they don't have a political voice, which is to say they don't have the right to vote. Right? So it's like in part, like what's being negotiated here, and this is definitely like to go back to what you were saying, Shruti, in part what's being negotiated is like we have to ask ourselves and take seriously the fact that like we call into question legibility every single fucking day. At any given moment. It's who are you outside of everybody else's expectations? Like, who are you, not even outside, but within that, right? Like, what is the interiority? What is your notion of the erotic that people can't seem to get access to for various reasons? Like, and what happens when you take that seriously as a space from which you theorize about blackness? It's to say, like, I think part of the reason why, like, folks take up pleasure politics, and Jake, like, yo, he's in this one of my meditations doing work on black pleasure politics right now. So one of the things that happens, right, is like when folks are talking about black feminist scholars are talking about black feminist pleasure politics, but also folks are theorizing black interiority, right there, and even like Ariane Cruz talking about like the politics of perversion, right, like claiming the perverse, claiming the deviant, claiming the outside. The fucking fact that so many people believe in the constitution of a black heteronormative family, which that's an oxymoron. You can't be black and heteronormative. That is not a thing. Right, but when people insist upon that narrative as like the thing that structures how we understand so-called pathology in black communities, which is just another way of saying black women are running shit and we have a problem with it, so we call it pathology. We need to regulate it over and over and over again. It matters to me that there are a lot of people, a lot of us in this room thrive outside the confines of heteronormativity. And so why in the entire black fuck would we continue to reinforce narrative over and over and over, which inherently excludes everybody in this room?
And interferes with best life. Right. It's a complete impediment to best life. Right. May I actually, one of our quieter siblings had their hand up.
Yes.
I stand still.
I didn't know that.
Sorry, I'm sorry. But I
I stand still.
If that's okay.
My name is Tracy.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi. Well, we kind of passed it, but I was going to ask,
Come on back.
or ask the room, like, is when it comes to the conversation of inclusion and representation, are those two things inherently limiting for Black people? Because if anything, what we're grasping for is to be seen as, or like, no, we're grasping for the idea of what that white supremacy has already made like relevant.
Yeah. So I would say they're like always already limiting precisely because inclusion, representation are about making marginalized people's lives accessible to the dominant group. Right? So those terms in and of themselves, it's like, you know, when people like Derek Bell like critique the idea of how schools deploy, right, the ceremony of Black History Month. Black History Month is for white people on college campuses. Right? And so that's the thing, is like inclusion and representation are like they are imbued with that particular power dynamic. This is what, like, you know, T.T. Bell Hooks. Loving Blackness as political resistance. It's like when you center Blackness, the idea of Blackness, or even like the Black subject, you center that and make that like essentially the ground from which you think and act and do all of these things that you're not particularly interested in the white gaze. This is in part like the whole reason. So Toni Morrison reading African literature is the reason why she wrote her book Playing in the Dark, where she talks about the narrative, like the deployment of Blackness as a narrative trope. Gothic literature is only possible through a particular understanding of Blackness, right? As being inherently synonymous with peril, with rupture, right? With dehiscence, right? Like it's the fucking wound that, like, as Moe says, is constantly it's all of those things, right? So in the context of white supremacy, we then say, well, you know, but Edgar Allan Poe didn't want to talk about like all these white folks that were just, or really white men that were just having feelings. And so you deploy narratively, right? And even in terms of tropes of Blackness, right? So Gothic, right? Gothic literature. Another way to put it is, Black women's literature was arguably always already Gothic before we talked about Gothic literature. Which is to say, if that literature is based on the experiences of Black women, like they're already outside, they're already dealing with darkness, they're already like on the other side of all of these power relationships, right? But because they're not the subjects that are centered in the approaches to studying the Gothic or framing the Gothic, then we come back like decades later and say, well, you know what? Black women, maybe Toni Morrison and Beloved was like making Gothic literature. And I'm thinking, well, you could actually just look at WPA narratives of formerly enslaved Black women and probably like tease out a lot of Gothic shit. Right? Or you can just talk to probably some of the oldest people in your family, the ones that didn't move to the city, the ones that stayed out in the country, their lives there, like the ones that know bitches, right? Like the ones that know U-Haul, the ones who like, you know, when all that's to say, these are the folks whose voices or whose recognition of their voices was not dependent on an expert coming in and validating them. Right? Like I think, and this is something, because I know we're like almost out of time, but one of the things that I think Hartman affords for us with these speculative histories, Black girls and young women, right, is that, I'm gonna step back for a second. If I'm like too far gone, you just say like shit. I can tell. Okay, cool. Don't we just don't go. So Hartman, before we get to Waver Lies Beautiful Experiments, right, is Hartman has been slowly over the past 20 years building a project that is pushing us further and further away, but also deeper into archives as repositories of historical thought. Right? One way to think about it is her first book, Sense of Subjection, which came out I think like 1998, 1999. This is where she is thinking about, or really calling into question, the idea of Black freedom. If the Emancipation Proclamation, right, was about not Black freedom, but initiating an ongoing regime of Black unfreedom, right? So, to put it slightly differently, if we call into question all of the moments of national celebration around Blackness, right, then what possibilities do we allow for ourselves? She did that with the first book. For the second book, Your Mother, she then started taking up what it means for her as a Black woman and a Black scholar to literally and figuratively do so. She talks, or she brings together 3 different narratives where one, she's talking about her personal relationship to her mother and what it meant for her to claim her own name and what that meant in terms of losing the name that her mother gave her. The second is what does it mean for Saidiya Hartman to be trained legal scholar and black literary critic and cultural historian, throws off the protocols of literary studies and historical thought, because to enter the archive of slavery is to enter a mortuary. So for her, she was looking at all of these historical documents to try to understand black life during the Middle Passage. But because under chattel slavery, black people were property, not people, then looking at all of these historical records is the fucking equivalent of looking at the history of a chair. Right? And so if all of the records only reinforce that particular dynamic, then what kinds of skill sets do you then mobilize to try to tell like stories? If history is nothing other than fiction plus power, then what does it mean to claim a relationship outside of that and offer a speculative history of who black girls and women might have been in the early 20th century? Right? And it matters that she does all of this by centering black girls and women who probably lived in the slums of Philadelphia and New York at the exact same fucking time that W.E.B. Du Bois was going through these slums with his research assistants to prove that black people are civilized, right? So essentially Hartman is saying the black folks at the turn of the 20th century that were saying like, we are civilized, like you can center us, that's a failed project because they're invested in the politics of inclusion and representation that is about showing white people that they can empathize with black folks. It's always already failed. And so by the time we get to Wake Our Lives Beautiful Experiments, Hartman's like, as a cultural historian, I'm supposed to go to an archive, extract all of these records, and then analyze the records. And so if I go to, we'll say, a girls' reformatory in New York, I'm supposed to look at the intake questionnaires. And as a historian, an objective thinker about a historical record, I'm supposed to go in and then identify with the person who constructed the questionnaire. So you're immediately identifying with the person that's in a position of power. And Hartman is investing in reading against that, right? So this is why, like, by the time we get to her citations, it's a chorus of voices. It's not a bibliography. It's not like a works cited. It's not a references page, right? It's the chorus of voices that allow her to read with and against the very record that she uses as the basis of the whole fucking book, right? As she spent a good decade or so in archives looking at all of these stuffy ass documents that are telling us everything except for who black girls and young women were in these reformatories. Because none of the documents were about telling us who they were. All of the documents were meant to justify the inclusion of black girls and young women into a carceral space that was a juvenile detention facility. And so if as a cultural historian you go into those archives and you take those records as somehow being objective reflections of black girls who the people who wrote the records didn't give a fuck about, then how is it possible that those records can also be a basis of their history? And she's like, they absolutely are, because everything that is outside of those documents is what we have to imagine into the record. Yeah. And the damn shame of it is that it's probably not going to be until enough white scholars do it that some African American scholars start paying attention. Shit matters. I'm not saying black.
African American. Anything other than black. Anything other than objectivity. Anything other than like that.
Right. But for me, like the gag with like all three of the fucking pieces is that. So, y'all might know about like Afro-pessimism. These like all these scholars that are theorizing about how the hold of the slave ship, that is the very space where the enslaved were contained, right? If the hold is a metaphor for how it is that we understand the ongoing reproduction of anti-blackness in the present, right? Afro-pessimists, like that's the whole fucking project, right? Like that's it. It matters that, and this is something like Fred Moten talks quite a bit about. He was like, but the hold is something to talk about as being so awful because there are all of these forms of life that are being authorized within it that we don't fuck with. Like, that's the thing. When your whole entire fucking project is proving that white supremacy exists in all these different ways, you actually don't get to the point where we're talking about black social life. Shit. Black social life gets us to the fact that, like, Joan Morgan was, like, arguing it a few years ago, right? She was like, look, there were orgasms on the slave ship.
Yes.
And so the fact that that idea alone goes against mastery, like that, like having that as the point of access, we can't even understand the possibility of black people, right, creating the opportunity or the space for pleasure inside the fucking hole. And last time I checked, not everybody died, and so people were clearly fucking, right? And it wasn't about political, well, it could have been about political whatever, might not have been. Right?
Say it
But
again.
part, what we're asked to come to terms with is the fact, right, that black people still created life. But if your inquiry stops at the reconstruction of the wholes, you actually don't give a fuck about black life. You care about proving over and over that white supremacy exists and that it's a thing.
Oh, so off, sis.
It's actually not the work. That I'm gonna say, amongst you all friends, that ain't the fucking work. And I like so, and I like I'll end with this, which is like, I'll say this to my students, like all the fun. If I gave you the opportunity to write a biography of blackness, and that biography had to be 15 chapters, and you couldn't talk about white supremacy or anti-blackness on chapter 2, what else could you or would you possibly fucking say about blackness and blackness? If you cannot even begin to imagine how to write that book beyond chapter 2, you've got a problem.
And how many people would still have jobs or have community leadership positions, right? They would all go away.
Right? It wouldn't be shit to have. Right? But that's the thing, right? So it's like, and I say that mostly because like it feels insurmountable. It feels fucking impossible. Right? But I simply turn and I think about my homegirl Samia, right? What does something with beauty if not us? And you can be beautiful in whatever way you want to frame that shit, but I'm also here for ugly niggas, like all day, right? Even when we're talking about like black aesthetics, this is my last thing because I'm a lush analyst, is that like niggas will do with cock eyes, bow legs, and pigeon toes, right? Where disability scholars will never even be able to entertain.
Niggas go fuck off.
I will stand. And so it matters that even in the ways, right, that we affirm ourselves and how we show up in the world and how we like show up in all of these different bodies and how we get space, how like Barbara reminds us in My Man Bo Van that you can sit, like this woman, the protagonist in this story, Hazel, Miss Hazel, walks up to this man, a handyman, a blind handyman in their building, right? Bo Van, she just wants to dance with him. She wants to dance with him because he's got this, she was like, blind people got this about his and so imagine like if this is a living room, right? All of us are here for this party, this fucking social event, we're just kicking it, whatever else. Miss Hazel's gonna cut through that room, she's gonna go to Bill Van, she's gonna ask them to dance, just so they can like brush up cheek to cheek, shoulder bone to shoulder bone, right? Stomach to stomach, chest to chest, pelvic bone to pelvic bone. And they gonna sway back and forth. They're gonna sway back and forth. And the thing that she wants, that she needs, that Bo Van provides, is the like consider clasping onto another person's body and just feeling their
the frequency, that whole entire, that vibration, that spirit, that
like the register,
everything.
Yeah. So I'm like, begin to work from that space. That's all of the shit boils down to, begin to work from that space. Give language or something to that frequency. Like that thing that stirs out, or like what Dinesh would call it, like that odd flow of yes, that spills from.
Go off, sis.
That for me is the beginning of the work around blackness and black life. Because we do that shit every day.
Every day.
We carve out the spaces every fucking day. But we don't honor it enough to try to give it a language that means something to us and allows us to retain it. So, thank y'all for coming to kick it.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to get on the spot. I recognized that we were like just jumping in. Thank you for engaging in dialogue.
Like, is you funny, like, say shit like that? Like,